We are back, and we're going to start talking about the WWE clothing scandal that was revolving around this week. Daniela, you were among the first to cover that whole story.
So I guess we learned today, we learned recently, there's going to be some freebies at the polls on Tuesday. Vince McMahon announced that he'll be giving away some WWE swag. So.
And that is for what reason?
Well, that's because there was earlier discussion about whether WWE clothing would be permitted at polling places, whether that was seen as sort of an undue influence on people who are coming to vote, sort of a subtle message that you should support Linda McMahon.
It seems almost like one of his wrestlers taunting from the corner. He's just slapping around the state right now, because in his release that said he was going to have the free giveaways there, he said, as a courtesy to the voters, we won't do it within 75 feet. That's the law. So basically he was saying, I could do that if I wanted to, but I'll be a nice guy and don't do it. So, I mean, it's crazy.
Well, even in the lawsuit, he taunted that he's going to wear his WWE gear to the poll in the lawsuit, which, you know. So
there's a lot of speculation. It's just a big publicity stunt for Vince, who obviously is very effective at using PR to make a point.
Well, it was interesting. I thought that that Susan Bysowitz's tone kind of changed, because I talked to her on the day that she, and I never said there was a formal ban, but she definitely did say there's a link between Linda McMahon and the WWE, and that she had left it up to the discretion of the local registrars. And then when I talked to her a few days later, then she said, no, even if they wore campaign T-shirts, you know. I mean, I know she doesn't want to disenfranchise voters, obviously.
Yeah, normally you don't have to worry about Halloween, but I mean, maybe somebody will come to the polls dressed up as Hulk Hogan or as Linda McMahon or somebody. You don't know. I mean, and also Vince McMahon talks about the 75 feet. I mean, what happens on foot number 76? You know, you'll probably get your T-shirt there, or foot number 80, or whatever it might be.
A good reason for reporters to cover the polls that day.
I know, because we don't know where they're going to be, where Vince might show up and be handing out the giveaways.
I also think that the ironic thing, or the dangerous thing about Bysowitz's statement, was that she laid it right at the feet of the poll workers. Now, I have two neighbors who work every single poll. They're volunteers, they're retired, they're civic-minded, and I could see them spitting out their coffee in the morning when they found out that they were going to be the arbiters of who was going to be able to vote based on what they wore. I mean, that was the crazy thing about it all. And then when it was thrown back, and she did back up and walk back her statements on it, fortunately. So the lawsuit turned into one big stage for Vince McMahon, and as Daniela rightly pointed out, he's a genius at that stuff.
Right.
Also, the average poll worker, as you said, many of them are senior citizens. Probably 9 out of 10 couldn't name 5 wrestlers at all. And if somebody came in with a T-shirt for wrestler XYZ, they might not know the difference.
And what if they weren't part of the WWE? What if they were part of the other wrestling program that's very popular?
Crazy.
That would have been difficult to tell as well. We could talk about that race, though. The other thing notable about that race is that the ads have gotten considerably more positive in recent days. That ad with Linda McMahon saying, "I'd be honored to have your vote." I mean, a completely different tone.
Yeah. She's certainly showing sort of a kinder, gentler side. She has a really, I think, just from a production value, kind of a nice ad showcasing her daughter, talking about growing up with Linda McMahon as her mother, and certainly much warmer. And Blumenthal's doing the same thing. He has a nice ad up right now where people are talking about what he did for them and how he helped them. So.
And the polls now show a much bigger gap than we've seen in recent weeks.
Yeah, the most recent Quinnipiac poll showed 12 points, although there was another poll out last week that showed a little closer, 8 percentage points, I think, is the gap there at the CT Capital Report poll.
Do you think that it will stay that way until?
It's tough to say. I mean, according to the Q poll, most people have made up their mind, but who knows? A lot of people don't believe the polls. So,
and as Chris pointed out at the very beginning, the Q poll had the primary wrong. But if you look at some of these polls without getting too inside, CT Capital Report the people that do it uses automated voice polling, as opposed to Quinnipiac and Suffolk, who both use live callers. And the live callers, which is supposedly more accurate, because who knows who's picking up the automated call, pressing the buttons? Could be a 10-year-old kid. They wouldn't know. But the Quinnipiac poll seems to show the gap a little bit bigger, and I think McMahon really is going to need a Hail Mary pass at the end of this to make up, even if it's 8 points.
I do think you're probably right. Probably a lot of people, certainly in the Senate race, the Blumenthal-McMahon race, anyone who's been paying attention, I would think most people are decided by this point. They've gotten so much in the mail at their homes, so much on television, so much in the papers. And that's why you see such a high number of people who have decided in that particular race. The governor's race, it's not as many decided. For whatever reason, I think the governor's race, clearly McMahon, it's been essentially a year-long effort. If you are an adult in Connecticut and you say you don't know who Linda McMahon is, chances are you're not voting at all.
Right.
And it's also, it makes you think what each of these candidates would do the next morning if they lost. Here's Dick Blumenthal. I've been Attorney General for 20 years. My whole life has been public service. I had my eye on the U.S. Senate my whole life, and now what do? And Linda McMahon wakes up, I just dropped $45 million on something. What do I got to show for it? A freebie T-shirt for my husband? I mean, it really is a high stakes as far as their personal situation. It's a high stakes battle.
Absolutely. Well, at least she's not Meg Whitman in California, spending $140 million.
Sure.
So.
Well, what's interesting as we have this discussion is how many people we've just talked about who were running for the U.S. Senate who are now running for other races.
Interesting. And then, of course, the Attorney General's race is now back in the headlines with Martha Dean challenging George Jepson's qualifications, which is a storyline that we, of course, have heard before. You know, questioning whether he has litigation experience, and I was also wondering whether he did.
I mean, to me, this is just absolutely crazy. I think we're to the point where a lot of people, at least the people I've talked to and have written to my blog, is that let the voters decide. I mean, you're going to have the court come in and take one of these one of the candidates, one of the only two candidates on the ballot for Attorney General off. I mean, that's crazy. But the court put themselves, they made their own bed with the Bysewicz decision, where they narrowly defined what active practice of law the 10 years are supposed to have, what it is, and it's supposedly litigation experience. And what is that? Do you have to actually be in the court? I mean, I have a brother who's a litigator. He's in court all the time, but I have a father who...
Ahead, Connecticut is first in the worst kind of category. Coming up, we're going to look at efforts to improve our schools.